Awesome.
So let me make you host. Are you going to need to do screen sharing?
I'm not. I'm definitely not. I am so not that tech savvy.
Okay, then I'll just keep it on me.
I do it all the time with our youth, and they're always like, Alexis, you're doing it wrong. So I just, I just don't anymore. All right, give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to grab my pruner so I can show y'all proper harvesting with good pruners, not the janky ones that are right here.
Look how sad it is in California. It was snowing where I'm at this morning.
Oh, I'm about to be in a t-shirt. It's hot. It's not a hot day, but it's not a cool day. That's for sure.
Oh my
okay, God. So I'm coming to y'all from the San Fernando Valley. And I'm going to give you guys like some broad information, and then I'm going to narrow some specifics in. Okay. So I wanted to go through, I'm just pulling up my notes real quick. I wanted to go through a true process of tea making, from growing to harvesting to storing. So I'm going to give you guys like a very, I tried to figure out like the easiest, most approachable way for people to do this from the go. So some of you who are like tea growers already, some of you who are already like doing this on a small scale, this may be very similar to what you're doing. I might just be able to introduce some new plants or ideas. Some of you guys have never grown or harvested tea or herbs for tea blends. Then I hope that this is a very simple, broken down way for you to understand how to do this on a smaller scale, but this is also a very scalable system. So here at the farm, let me introduce myself, by the way. I'm Lexy, Alexis, all the things, mom, whatever you want to call. And you're going to hear a dog right next to me in a second, but he's the farm. There's 2 farm dogs, so don't freak out. And I started Black Thumb Farm in 2020. I've been teaching urban farming and gardening for over 10 years now. And I started Black Thumb Farm because it's so interesting because I was like slowly building up this like frustration of like working for very privileged people and delivering content and information I felt was really valuable to my community and people that could relate to where I was from, but those were not the people I was spending my time educating. So I just like over like a couple years, I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And by 2020, when COVID hit, I was teaching out of school and I was teaching virtually, and I was teaching at this very famous school with a lot of extremely wealthy people and a lot of celebrities and things like that. And I just kind of like reached my cap where I said, like, I don't think I can do this. And then the universe, God, all of it worked together and the school actually closed. So I said, then I'm going to take all of my resources, all of my assets, and I'm going to start an organization that works for the BIPOC community, that works for underserved communities, for people who are not of privilege. And I'm going to pour into that community. And I specifically love, and I've always felt very connected to young people. I taught little kids for years and years, and I love little kids. I have 3 little kids. They are 6 months, 2 years old, and 4 years old. So yes, pray for me. I could take all the prayers all the time, but I've always felt very connected to kids that are ages like 12 to 20. You're not a kid at 20, but young people ages 12 to 20. In teaching high school, I've always felt like this is such a forgotten like age group where people are like, you're kind of on your own, figure it out, like you're gonna be an adult. And I just feel like, no, you can still like pour so much into them. They're still so young, malleable, excited, like they're just older. So anywho, Black Thumb Farm is I'll show you. I'm gonna just turn this camera right around so you could probably just see the bar, but here's the garden where we are growing tons of veggies, and we've got some peach trees over here and apple trees in the back and eucalyptus everywhere, and there's beekeeping over there and an orchard over there and a duck area right here. And this is like a small little utopia. It's incredible. So We started farming here. We started working with Cottonwood, which is this whole entire community system, very early on. And now we can call this our home. And we've got a lease here until 2024. I'm so excited. So we can really, really build some roots. And my goal is to just slowly brainwash the owner here into like allowing us to keep the space running. Anyway, so that's some background on Black Thumb Farm. Let's jump into tea though. So we started Black Thumb Farm, we started growing herbs and things like that to make tea blends as like a fundraiser for our fellowship program. And our fellowship program is like an internship, but we pay them, so we don't call it an internship because I don't believe in free labor really. Volunteering is cool, but long-term volunteering, and I don't know, especially when you're working with young BIPOC kids, I'm like, this is not a great use of their time. They can learn and pour in their resources and be able to gain and get a hand up into their future. So we have a fellowship program, but anyway, everything we do has an educational aspect. So it wasn't just like, we're going to grow tea. It was like, we're going to learn, we're going to take courses from herbalists. We're going to have herbalists come here and teach us how to grow things. We're going to grow some from seed, grow some from seedling, graft some from other people. And most of all of our teachers, actually, all of our educators are people of color. We welcome in Indigenous people to teach us how to utilize the indigenous plants on our property, which is there's a bunch. We have California natives surrounding the garden. In the garden, it's not all natives, but all the plants around the garden are. And we believe strongly in like the history and the medicinal properties and all of those things that it seems like all of you do believe in as well. So everything we do at Black Thumb Farm is educated from that kind of foundation. We don't appropriate, we don't, and when we teach Dia de los Muertos, we have someone who is of Mexican heritage and celebrates Dia de los Muertos come in and teach us. I am not the teacher on all things. So we try very hard to incorporate all that. So anyway, teas, we have had several people come in and teach us how to grow some of these things, especially people who have been doing them for a long time. We love generational learning. We love learning that's not necessarily from the book or an internet, things that can be passed down and handed down. So my goal is that everybody who comes through here and does this tea workshop with us, or these tea practices, not only can help themselves, can nurse themselves, but can nurse their communities, nurse their children, nurse their nieces, nephews, the people around them, their ancestors who may have lost this. So I say all that because many times when I'm talking, you'll be like, man, she is really like trying to get deep with this, but everything to us is very deep here at the farm. So we don't just grow herbs and flowers for the sake of pretty teas. We're growing them because these nourish our souls as well as our bodies. So anywho, let's talk about growing from seed. I am feeling like this like growing from seed thing is becoming very popular, and it's great. But I also know you guys are in zone 5, and that can be really tricky because you can plant seeds about a month before your last frost date. And a lot of people who get very cold winters have to wait till like right after their frost date. So it's tricky for Taos because you can actually plant seeds before your last frost date, but you just want to be careful that you're not planting too far ahead. So my suggestion is always like, know your frost dates when you live in a place where you have to cut back your perennials and you have to start seeds for spring, summer, fall growing. You have to know your frost dates, okay? So the big 3 groups I would say of herbs are like you have your perennials, you have your annuals, and then you have your biennials. I know some people are like, what is that? That's going to be like your parsley, right? Technically parsley, some people cut it back like it's a perennial, but it does complete its life cycle after 2 years. So there are a few others like that, but you have your main groups are perennial and annual. So I want to kind of show you guys the difference between like a perennial and an annual, because you can tell the difference not just in the like growing them, like perennials are a plant that are already established and stay in the ground and can for a long time, and annuals you have to plant and reseed every year, or they let them reseed on themselves. But there are like textures and differences in the structures of the plant as well when you're talking about perennials and annuals. So can y'all just like thumbs up me real quick if you're cool with me like walking around the farm with this, and it doesn't make you feel like you're in like you're super dizzy and you're gonna have a little bit of a like, Alexis, slow down, because if you're cool with it, That's what I'm gonna do. Okay. So we just got our cilantro started, which I know people are like, how are you growing cilantro? It's January. I can't tell you, but one of our farm hands, which is our other program, one of our kids, she planted all this cilantro, and it's all coming up. So you can see exactly how delicate this is. So if you start to feel like any of your herbs are of the more delicate route, I'll talk about this more specifically, but you're going to be a little bit careful when you go to drying them out. And we have California poppy here, which we also use in our teas. You can also make tinctures with California poppies. And that's all celery over there. And then we have our perennial herbs over here. And you have your sages, you have lemon balm, you've got oregano. And you can see like this is not nearly as delicate as your cilantro plant's going to be. Your stevia even, which is a perennial, but it's a little more delicate on the side. But all of these, which are also from the mint family, they're a little more hardy and they can withstand cold temperatures much better than your annual. So I know some people really like to let their annuals like go on as long as possible. That's never my suggestion. My suggestion is always like for the best teas, the most medicinal properties, you're not going to let those plants just kind of go on forever. Okay. All right. We're back. And if y'all have any questions, because it's a small group with us right here, please feel free to like write it in the chat. And if it's urgent, go ahead and just like unmute yourself if it's completely on this topic, because I want to make sure y'all feel like you're not going to forget. And I also don't want to forget. Okay. So let's talk about hardy herb seeds that can be planted a few weeks before frost. So if you're growing things like basil, you can throw those in before the frost. Cilantro, you can throw those in before the frost. And then anything that might be a perennial that you're thinking you want to grow from seed, you definitely want to get those in before the frost, because right after that frost, you're going to have the first leaves coming out, and they're going to need a lot of sun. And you're going to get a lot of sun right after your frost. I've learned from in Taos that you guys get a lot of sunny days once this cold weather's over. So be sure to get those kind of started. I would say no sooner than like 2 weeks before the frost and no later than like a month. Does that make sense? Also, let's talk about the best soil for growing your seed starts. You do not want to, this is like something that I didn't learn when I first started growing, I would say growing anything edible, but specifically like growing herbs. You don't necessarily want to direct seed these seeds into your garden beds or into your rows if you're on like an urban farm or if you have an outdoor farm. And if you are doing seeds where you start indoors, you need to be very careful about using soil that is specifically for seed starting, okay? So soil that is already in your ground or in your garden bed, you've probably been nurturing it with compost, you've probably been caring for it, but it's not going to have, or it's going to have way too many nutrients. And seeds can burn easily. Seed coats can burn really easily when there's a lot of nitrogen in there, when there's a lot of magnesium in there. So you're gonna wanna use seed starter mix. So we have ours kind of like dumped out here on the floor because it was a little wet. And this looks like chocolate cake. Can y'all see the texture of that? That's like straight up, makes me want a brownie now. But anyway, it's the texture of a chocolate cake if you were to crush it in your hand. Now, this is a little bit too wet, so we're leaving it out here and we're gonna sift it through actually this afternoon. But you want this to be definitely moist, but not wet. And you want it to have a very loose texture. This is the best for starting seeds. Now, when you go to if you're gonna go buy soil from like a Home Depot or Lowe's, it might be a little tricky to find this seed starting mix. So I would suggest find a local nursery that you can buy from or look online. And you need to have something that is no more than the NPK, the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. You want to have no more than 3-3-3. Okay. Ideally, you want a number more like 1-1-1 to start your seeds. And again, that's going to make it so your seeds don't burn, the seed coats don't burn off. But also when you're growing herbs, especially perennials that you want to last a long time, you want your plant to look for the food. I feel like in the farming world, we don't talk about that enough, especially with like, I know we talk about a little bit with like fruit trees, right? You don't want your plant to get so comfortable in this tiny spot that they're unable to kind of like branch out to look for more nutrients, right? So when you start your seeds in this low nutrient soil, once you bump it up, once it sprouts its first leaves, and once it gets its true leaves, and you transplant it, it's immediately going to start looking for those nutrients. Those roots are immediately going to spread. That's exactly what you want, because that is going to mean your plant has stronger root system. It's going to have a more firm stem. You're going to get better leaves, like everything about it. So make sure you're starting a little carefully. Okay. Next. And I hope I'm not going too fast, because I feel like I'm checking the time right now. I want to make sure I give you guys like as much knowledge as possible. But okay, so I'm going to pull out my seeds real quick. Don't mind that Oreo package you just saw. Again, there's lots of teenagers here, and you know they love them some Oreos. Okay, so, oh, here we go. This is exactly what I wanted. So if you're going to be growing, first of all, if this is your first time growing, I would suggest growing things that excite you. When you first start with any group of plants, whether that's vegetables, flowers, herbs, whatever it is, grow things that excite you, and also grow things that you know you'll use. I feel like it's really tricky when people start to grow tea leaves, because like I had someone ask me about oolong tea, and they were like, oh, I really wanted to grow tea leaves. I've never grown herbs for tea. I've never grown anything. So I started with oolong. And I was like, you started with oolong? And they're like, yeah, well, it just seems like I know it has a lot of health benefits. And it does. Oolong tea does have a lot of health benefits. But when you're first starting out, you want to grow something that you're going to use a lot. So my suggestion is always to like take into account not only what you want medicinally, but also what you can utilize on a regular basis. So yeah, that is my suggestion. So anyway, I've got my seeds here. So we've got basil and chamomile. Now, basil, you definitely want to start, I would suggest in your zone 5 that you start this indoors with a seed starting mix, and then transplant outside, because the foliage is very tender. A plant more like sage that has a seed that can handle an earlier transplant, you can totally transplant outside. But with your seeds, again, always start with that seed starting mix. So let's move on to prepping your soil. After you start your seeds and you're ready for transplanting, I feel like there's like this idea behind herbs that they can grow in less fertile soil. And my rule of thumb is almost anything can grow in less fertile soil. But do you want it growing in less fertile soil? Not necessarily, right? So feed your soil. I don't know how often you guys compost, but feeding your soil a couple times a year is awesome. I don't suggest feeding your soil more than once a season. That even feels extreme, 4 times a year to feed your soil. But feeding your soil a couple times a year to make sure you have as many nutrients as possible. And you don't want to feed your soil right before you transplant your herbs. That's going to give like it's like drinking Kool-Aid. You're like, I got this rush. That's not like long-term though. You also want to make sure that all of the microbes and fungi in your soil have enough time to start to process and break down whatever nutrients you're adding to it. So the winter is a great time for you to, once it's not snowing, it's a great time for you to feed your soil and prep your soil, so that as you start these seedlings inside, once the frost is past, your soil can kind of be ready. But I always prep with compost. If you have an animal farm near you, you can always add in animal manure, as long as you know what these animals are eating. And you know that this hasn't been, like the fertilizer hasn't had any hormones or anything's added to it. And I also love to use things like kelp fish fertilizers. We also love to use, we even use like neem oil here sometimes because neem is fantastic for your soil and wonderful for your plants and also amazing for your body. But make sure you're feeding your soil beforehand. It's not something that you're like, I started my seeds, now I'm going to wait for them to grow and then feed my soil. All right. I also feel really strongly about mulching. Here we mulch all the time because we have extreme drought and hella fires. But I think mulching is wonderful because mulching feeds your soil without you even thinking about it. You know, all of those wood chips, dried leaves, grass clippings, all of those things are just decomposing and feeding your soil. Straw, but they're also retaining moisture. And your plant doesn't have to work as hard when you're doing things like that. So mulching is wonderful. We have mulch everywhere. Everywhere I look, there's mulch here just because we're always trying to like save the water, save the water, save the water. So mulch right after you plant. Okay, so let's talk about planting. I'm going to show you guys. I brought a couple small herbs to plant over there. I don't know if anyone needs planting techniques, but I just thought let's just do it just in case someone's like, I've never planted an herb. I'm going to plant an herb. You're going to be here with me. We're going to plant an herb together. Okay. Grabbing our shovels from our very organized shelf. And so far, before I jump into planting, because after planting, we're going to go into harvesting. Does anybody have any questions about seeds? No. I'm looking through. I see no hands, no questions. Okay, cool. All right. Let's jump in. So I'm going to plant, this one is a tricky one. I'm going to plant a stevia plant. Now, some people feel strongly that stevia is not necessarily an herb. But I think stevia counts because it can be used for many, many purposes, but it's in the mint family. So I think anything in the mint family is an herb. All right, I'm going to set up the tripod right here. Oh my gosh, I should be doing this all the time. Okay, so right here I have a plant, ruda, which is a plant that's been used forever in Central America, and it's used as like people use it like as a detoxing plant, but it also can like kill all kinds of viruses and infections. So like my husband is Mexican, and his mom, when I had an ear infection, she made like a paste of this and wrapped it up in a like one of these little stems and put it in my ear, and my infection was gone in like less than an hour. I mean, this stuff is for real, but it needs to be used very cautiously because it's extremely strong. So it's not something that I would say like if you're pregnant or trying to get pregnant, you definitely don't want to use this herb. But it can be used again for like detoxing if you're feeling like you want to do a cleanse or something like that. That's for you. But that one wasn't very healthy. I have a really beautiful one right here. So that little baby guy can go. Okay, here's our stevia plant. Some people call it a sugar plant, but I will say plants that are labeled sugar plant are not necessarily a stevia plant. They can be an offset plant from the same family, but they're not necessarily stevia. I just went with stevia because we have people in here all the time who have autoimmune disorders or very, very specific diets. Even some of our students do based on what's best for their health. And I had no idea how many people were coming through the farm that were sugar-free until we had an event where we had lemonade that was made with sugar and half of our attendees couldn't use it. So we decided, we have to grow stevia because we need some kind of alternative. So here we go. I had a teacher once who he is a Chumash native, and he said, never beat the pot like a colonizer would whenever you're taking out your plants. So we always like gently massage and love our plants as we go. And so I'm gonna plant it right here. I'm gonna move this tripod over so y'all can see. And this is a plant I would never, ever, ever tell you to plant in your garden, which is peppermint, because your girl will take over like nobody's business. So I'm gonna plant this in a pot today. She ain't gonna live here, but you are gonna live here, beautiful stevia. I'm gonna go ahead and plant this in the middle row. And this soil, so I'm gonna show you this soil as well, because this soil has been has been composted very well. So we have a massive compost system on site because we partner with an organization here called LA Compost, and it's a community compost. Literally anyone can bring in their food scraps, and they break it down into compost, which is so, so cool. I can tell you guys more about LA Compost if you're interested in doing something like that on your site, because we get people in here from all over, and it's amazing. Okay, so the soil on top that is compost is retaining so much more moisture. You can also see a lot of organic matter in this compost up here. That's great because if you have like more rough organic matter, as it breaks down, it's going to feed your herbs really, really well as the water breaks it down from top. So as I dig a little deeper though, you'll see the soil has, man, this has been composted like crazy. This makes me very, very happy. The soil texture is a little more fine underneath. Like this is our older soil. And you can see it's more granular like sand, even though it's not super sandy soil. It has smaller pieces of everything. This is ideal. So I wouldn't suggest planting if your topsoil is compost and it hasn't fully broken down, that's okay. But I wouldn't suggest planting directly into fully unbroken down compost because again, it's going to be like a shock to your plants and then they're going to get really excited and they're going to be like, wait, what happened? So I like this already broken down. There's not too much root binding here, but there's a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen up these firm roots. Now, when you're working with like more hardy perennial herbs, like anything in the like sages, stevias, lemon verbena, you're going to have, when you get these at nurseries, you're going to have some like tougher roots. But I did want to say that these roots, these really thick roots on those plants do grow very quickly. So if you're having to like break off some of these roots, that's okay. In that family and these like very, very, very strong perennials, as Kendrick Lamar would say, they gonna be all right. Okay. All right. So let me show you again what I'm doing here. I'm just breaking them down from the inside because I want these roots out here to continue to spread. Here we go. Here we go. All right. I'm going to dig this hole a little deeper because again, I want to get to that fine soil at the bottom. I don't want this just broken down compost up here. And with those things from the mint family, you can go ahead and bury a little bit on the stem. So I'm going to bury up to like right here. And you go ahead and give it like 4 or 5 tucks. Now, when I first started gardening and I just like garden at home, I never wanted to push plants down too far. And then I went and worked at a farm, and the second farm I worked at, and one of the farmers came by and she pulled up all my plants that I had just planted. And I said, oh my God, what are you doing? And she said, if I can walk by and pull these up, you did not secure them enough. So when you are planting, be sure to secure your seedlings. Now that doesn't mean be super aggressive with them, but that means secure them. You know what I'm saying? Secure them. We also get squirrels here. And I think where you guys are, you get deer. So just, you don't want something coming by and pulling up your plant. Things are going to come by and, eat your plants, but you don't want them pulling them up. All right. So I'm going to talk about harvesting now because I feel.
There was a question before you move on. Do you ever sprinkle a little compost in the hole?
I don't with herbs. I do with vegetables. With tomatoes, I do, or fruits. I would do with tomatoes. I do even with broccolis. But with herbs, I don't. And the reason I don't is because I like my perennials to be very hardy and essentially withstand me, my possible negligence, my possible mistakes. And I work with kids all the time. So I need these plants to be as strong and hardy as possible. So I don't throw compost into the hole. Am I going to tell you not to do that though? Absolutely not. If you feel like that works best for you and that's a tried and true thing, go for it. I wouldn't say I wouldn't do that with any plant though. That's my suggestion with herbs. That's not my suggestion as a rule of thumb. That's a great question. All right. So I'm going to harvest today from the lemon verbena, the lemon balm, lemongrass. I swear these aren't all the same plant. They just all start with lemon. And I wanted to also harvest some echinacea, but I'm not sure if it got frost. The frost got it. So we're gonna check out the echinacea in a second. Okay, so I've got some lemon balm right here. Got some oregano right there, and then some lemon balm here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lemon balm plants. Now lemon balm is a perennial. Excuse that duck that's laughing at me. She's so rude. Lemon balm is a perennial. And where you live in Taos, you are gonna wanna cut this plant back in the wintertime. The only reason, and I even would cut them back here in California, in Southern California. The only reason I didn't cut them back is because it's very small. I planted these early fall, they're young. And with perennials, I think that there's this, there's like a lot of advice that will tell you to like cut it all the way back. Here's the thing though, that some of this foliage is going to be used to help bring your plant back in the spring. So in Taos, I would not suggest cutting your plant all the way to the bare stems. I would suggest cutting your plant down. I'm actually gonna do one. I'm gonna sacrifice one today because I've got 6, it's fine. I would suggest cutting it back a lot, but not all the way. So I'm gonna move this a little closer so you guys can see. So when you're wintering your lemon balm, let's get this. Here, here, here. I'm gonna leave a plant probably about that small. Okay, so all of the fresher new growth, I'm gonna cut off and I'm gonna give it a very solid base. I'm actually gonna do this one too, because I'm gonna give us a lot of lemon balm for our class today.
Another question, do you allow it to bolt at the end of the season with herbs?
For perennials, no. I'm sorry, the sun's right behind my head. Okay, for perennials, no. And that's my personal preference, because when you're harvesting for tea, typically you want to do this early in the morning. So I'm already cheating right now, but you want to get your flowers before they're full, robust floral. So when they've bolted, it's very hard to catch like the tiny flowers in the lemon balm or the tiny flowers. And because it's a perennial, you don't necessarily need to let it bolt and go to seed and drop its own seed. You can just kind of cut it back knowing that it's going to come back. Is that why you're asking about the letting it bolt though? Because of like it's self-seeding? Yes, no, maybe so. Because that's why I would say you don't need to do that. You can use the flowers in lemon balm as well. And you can use the flowers from any of the mint family herbs actually. So you don't have to do that. But let me know if that did not answer your question fully. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this second one. All right, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. She looks good. These are not dead leaves, by the way. These are from our cottonwood tree. She's raining on us. All right, so here is my harvest. Let's put these in this container of lemon balm. And here's what my plants are left like. So you can see like if some snow got on top of this, it's gonna be okay. You can even also when it gets cold for the winter, when you're laying your garden down, you can cover this with straw so that you can protect it from frost a little better. You can go ahead and mulch with straw. And then once that frost date passes, or right before that frost date passes, but you know there's no snow on the way, you can go ahead and uncover this so it can start getting some sun. But the straw cover on your perennial herbs, once you've cut them back like this, without cutting them all the way to where they're just stems, but once you've cut it back to where they're really small, you can totally cover them and they'll do great. I'm also going to harvest some of this oregano on here just because she's so cute. And oregano, same thing. You're going to cut this plant as far back as I did the lemon balm. And this oregano is not huge right now because we harvest every other week every week we harvest. 1 week we harvest for our students who come through. They're allowed to take any food they want home to their families. And then the next week we harvest for Hope of the Valley, a local nonprofit here that serves like almost 1,000 people, houseless community members meals 3 times a day. So they use a bunch of food from our garden in their meals, which is super cool. Okay, so I've got my oregano and lemon balm. We're gonna move on to our lemon verbena. And then we're gonna come back for lemongrass. And we're gonna check on the echinacea. You guys wanna see these cute peas? They're so tall, aren't they beautiful? Okay, I digress. All right, so here is we're getting a lot of shade in here from the peas, which is great. So here's lemon verbena. I'm not sure how often y'all have worked with this plant, but she's top tier to me. I love that lemon verbena. It kind of bushes out when you prune it properly. So here's how it looks here. So when you kind of cut it back like we did here, here's the stem of the plant. And then you can see on the nodes, which is where the leaf connects, she's already started to have some new growth. So when you cut it back when they're young, you can kind of train her to bush out a little bit more, then grow like long and leggy, like your girl right here. Long and leggy is totally fine though, but it's up to you and how you like your herbs to grow. I prefer the herbs to kind of bush out, but this lemon verbena, she decided that she wasn't interested in that, and that's totally fine. It's her choice, you know, her body, her choice. Okay, so here we go. With lemon verbena, it does get like a woody stalk pretty early. So some herbs like rosemary, you know, when you're pruning or when you're harvesting rosemary, you don't want to get a lot of the woody stalk just because it's not going to have the same flavor profile. But lemon verbena is pretty woody all the way down. So I'm gonna go ahead and you can come with us. Now she is pretty soft up top, and that's ideal when you're using the stems, but I'm gonna use it all. And I'm also going to harvest you. There we go. All right. And then our echinacea lives right behind us, but I'm gonna show you kind of what echinacea looks like when it's not doing as hot. I'm gonna go ahead and flip my camera just so I can see a little better. Here we go. All right, so here's an echinacea flower right here. So we planted these in the late fall, and they did super well. We got tons of beautiful flowers out of them, and then we had to cut them back because once we had a couple days of frost, which we usually have literally only a couple days of like really, really cold nights, but this winter we had an insane amount of cold. So this is what it looked like when we didn't cut it back. You can see she's not super excited. So anyway, make sure you cut back your echinacea. And echinaceas, a lot of people love to cut them all the way back and let them self-seed and use them like an annual, but we actually grow ours like a perennial. So we cut them back and they come back in the spring. You can see she's already starting to flower. There's one buried here. We've got all these California native plants growing amongst our other plants. So anywho, this is the spirit echinacea, by the way, but not doing so well. So I'm going to harvest a couple of the leaves because you can also use the leaves from echinacea, not just the flowers. So we're gonna go ahead and get that. Gonna get you, and then I'm gonna harvest a couple of these leaves here. I always harvest the larger leaves because echinacea leaves get pretty huge. Not like as big as a sunflower, but they do get pretty large. These echinacea flowers and leaves are incredible for teas because they dry so fast. They dry so fast, and they hold up so well on top of all their health benefits. So, all right, I've got a little bit of a harvest here. We're gonna walk back through the garden. Oh, and lemongrass. I'm so sorry. I almost forgot the lemongrass. So our lemongrass she's changed a lot. So she grew super huge. Then we cut her back a wee bit. And now she's starting to come back. So let's see. I think I could do this with one hand. When lemongrass, like most herbs, you harvest from the outside. Don't look at this little tomato plant. She's trying to live. I like to cut lemongrass all the way at the stalk. I know a lot of people who will just cut at this younger part right here. I'm so sorry. Let me go ahead and move this leaves apart. There you go. Can y'all see that better? Okay. So some people who like to cut just like right here and get this younger part of the stalk. But when it comes to teas, you're not eating this, right? You're not gonna like consume this in a meal, like making this into some kind of like wonderful curry or like stir fry. So you can go ahead and get these more rough parts. Okay, so we've got our lemongrass. Here we go. So I've got my lemongrass here. And then we've got all our other herbs here. And let's take these to our little processing area. And I'm going to talk to you about. Yes.
That long-legged one, was that lemon verbena?
That is lemon verbena.
Thanks.
That's her right there. Yeah, the one I'm kind of all up on right here. Yeah. So I'm going to lay these out right here so you guys can get a great little vision of them. Don't mind my beautiful picture. Okay. So we're going to talk about drying herbs right now. And there are 3 main things you want to know about drying herbs. Okay. So I'm going to break some hearts when I say this. It's all right. I signed up for some broken hearts today. Drying in your oven is, I don't even want to say it's not ideal. I want to just go ahead and be an extreme person and say, don't do it. Okay. Reason being, your oven cannot get to a low enough temperature. So if you use your oven, and then you turn off your oven and try to dry your herbs in your oven that way, if that's the only option you have, that might work. But that's not ideal in any way, because herbs, as they dry out, over time will lose some of their medicinal properties. But when you're drying them out at a low temperature, that over time extends. So you don't necessarily want cool temperatures, but the hotter they are, you'll burn off some of those oils or burn off some of those things you want in your oil. So you don't want to do that. You really want to have a either dehydrator, which I know, like, I'm not going to tell you to go buy a new thing. Having a dehydrator is awesome, or hang drying. Hang drying is as tried and true as can be. Hang drying, you just have to be specific with a few things before you hang dry. So I'll talk about the things that I think, the ways that you can hang dry, but first I'm going to start with the dehydrator. Okay. So let me go ahead and move. I'm going to move this so that you guys can see my workstation a little bit more, which has been covered in dirt for days because we are in the middle of planting our spring crops. Don't be mad. I know this is not the time most people plant their spring crops, but here in Southern California, this is our time to start. Okay, so here's our lemongrass. Now I use a Nesco dehydrator. Now, every single herbalist I have learned from, every single one swears by Nesco dehydrators. These are professional grade and they're not super expensive. I think you can get a pretty good one like this on Amazon for about $80, which is a little bit, that's the money. I'm not acting like $80 is nothing, but if you're going to make teas, if you want to sell teas, or you want to harvest for yourself and your family for like your year, $80 is worth the investment. Or go in with a friend, 40 and 40, totally worth it. Okay, so your Nesco stacker comes with this, and it's going to come with trays. These trays are what you're going to use to dehydrate on. You also can get, I think it comes with a couple of these, but you're also going to get these really cool liners. So if you're trying to dehydrate things like tomatoes, peaches, teeny tiny pieces of lavender, you're going to use something like that. But I love these trays. It's not a huge hole. And this has been extremely easy for us to use. So I'm going to work off this Nesco tray. Now, people have like square Nescos. I know there's other brands of dehydrators. They're all good. I'm just going to show you a little bit about like the size you want to use. Now, a rule of thumb is to also kind of utilize is you're not going to crush your herbs until it's time to use them. So one of the best ways, and I think some people do that is not necessarily beneficial and does cut back on your storage time, is crushing your herbs before you store them so that you can kind of like store more. That's not necessarily ideal because every cut, every crush you're breaking down some of the properties in that plant. Just like cutting back the plant is going to break down some of those properties in the plant. And if you want to use these for as much medicine as possible, as much of these calming, healing elements, you don't want to cut them too much, okay? So lemongrass is tricky because you can use this part of the lemongrass, and this is the part where most people eat, but it is going to take a little longer to dry out. I'm going to use some scissors for this. You can use pruners as well if you kind of if you clean your pruner super, super well, but I'm gonna go ahead and use some scissors that we usually use. All right. And go ahead. So I think ideally for storage, this is about the size I would do lemongrass. And I'm gonna fill this part of the tray with lemongrass. So lemongrass smells like bonkers good. And I learned from an herbalist, I'm also not going to do these parts that are a little bit from the older leaves. So you don't have to only utilize baby young leaves. Like it's not like lettuce where it's going to be older leaves are a little more bitter and the younger leaves are sweeter. Like with your herbs, you can use all of them. But I don't love these like, you know, crustier, crunchier parts. No thanks. So anywho. But, oh, and another thing I was going to mention, well, I guess I'll get to that in a second. I don't want to jump ahead. So we'll use this lemongrass in our, we have a tea that is, I don't want to mispronounce it because I did, Pyong Anada, which is a Korean name. And it means calming. So it's like a peppermint chamomile lavender tea. And then we have, when we make it here at the farm, when we have our programming, we add lemongrass to it and it just kind of brightens it. Okay. So the cool thing about dehydrators also is that you really don't need to lay these out like one leaf at a time next to each other, spread out. If you're making like 1 cup of tea, if you're like laying out your dehydrator tray to make 1 cup, sure, go ahead and do that. But that's kind of a waste of your time. So I would suggest go ahead and layer. This is fine, because there's still going to be enough aeration happening. When you talk about dehydrating your teas and drying out your tea leaves, it's all about the aeration, right? You want to make sure everything gets aerated. Now, lemon verbena, I'm going to go ahead and do this on the same tray. I just got to smell it really quick because it smells just, if you're not growing lemon verbena, if you walk away with something today, please grow lemon verbena. Okay, so for eating purposes, you might not want the stems, but the stems also have medicinal properties in them. So I know a lot of people who grow their tea leaves and just want to have the leaves. Also, the leaves dry faster than the stems usually do. So there's that. But in my opinion, if you're going to be crushing all of this, grinding all of this, breaking it down into a cup of tea, you can totally utilize the stems. That might not be as aesthetically pleasing if you're selling your blends or if you're making tea on site. Like if you're a restaurant or you are a cafe and you want to have your tea leaves, like let's say you serve them in a French press, it might not be as aesthetically pleasing to have nothing but leaves. But if you're making like bulk batches of teas or selling these for people to have at home or making them for yourselves on your homestead, stem it up. It's not a big problem. All right, so back down. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these just like about the same size as the lemon balm, right above the node. That looks like this. And then, but you know what, for these thicker ones, I'm going to take this off just because it's like a little bit awkwardly shaped. And then for these younger ones, I am going to dry the stems though. And then these more like, because you see how the mint family grows like a tea, right? Lemon verbena though is growing like a 3. Oh. Anyway, you want to make sure that these can lay down because you are going to stack them. And it doesn't have to be completely flat with no curling leaves or anything like that, but just do your best. Okay, so here we go. Now, my next tray, I'm going to go ahead and show you because I already dehydrated some for you. This is calendula and marigolds. So gorgeous, right? I know marigolds are grown as a companion plant all the time, but they also have a bunch of medicinal properties in them, and we love them. Their indigenous name is Cempasúchil. That's their name in, I don't even think that's Spanish. I think that is their indigenous name. And then calendula, which we all know calendula is life to me. Calendula has so much medicinal properties. Calendula oils can be used for everything. I just made a batch of oils where I dehydrated all the flowers, sat them in oil for 2 weeks in a cool, dry spot, and then mixed that with beeswax and a few essential oils. And I use it on my kids' skin because 2 of my kids have eczema, and it is just amazing. So here's the tricky thing though. You can dry these together. 100% you can dry these together. Leaves on one tray, flowers on another. But flowers take much longer to dry out than leaves do. So especially flowers like calendula, right, that have their center fully together. Now, I took a class once and the teacher said, pull off all the leaves of the calendula. I was like, girl, you want everyone to go through hundreds of flowers and pull off only the petals? I'm sorry, not the leaves, the petals. Pull off all the petals of calendula. That's probably not for you. Okay, so I would suggest, if you can and you have the time to, and you could break your time down and organize to do your flowers at once, because you can still do those at a low temperature. And I forgot to say this, a low temperature is 95 degrees. When you're drying out your herbs, you want to dry them at 95 degrees. You never want to go higher than like 105. So 95 to 100 degrees is ideal. I would not ever suggest higher than like 105. I think that's when you start to lose some of your medicinal properties. So if you can do your flowers together, you may want to go up to 100 degrees for your flowers. They are going to take a longer time than your leaves are. But if that's not an option for you, it's fine. They could totally dry together. Just check them. And the cool thing about these Nesco trays is if I was dehydrating these and I pulled off the top, which is where the heat is coming from, and I noticed that the flowers weren't dry but the leaves were, I could just take the leaf tray off. It's so cool. And the cool thing about these Nesco dehydrators is you can stack them 12 high. Yes, 12 high, 12 trays at once. So cool. Okay, next thing we're gonna do. Oh, and I'm gonna show you also. So we have our dehydrating herbs over here on our Nesco tray. But then we have leaves that we use, or flowers that we use on a very regular basis on a farm. Every Thursday and Saturday when we have kids here, we make tea. That's the first thing we do. We sit down, we have a meditation, we get centered, we do our Brene Brown 2-word check-in, and we have a cup of tea together before we start our hard work. And we will sometimes dehydrate our own herbs without the dehydrator just because we're using them so quickly, which is totally fine. And the only tricky thing without the dehydrator is like you do have a higher risk for mold if your products are not fully dried. So that's also why the dehydrator helps so much, because you can kind of assure thorough dryness. Like these calendula, you know, they crunch. You want your calendula to crunch when it's ready. These marigolds, she crispy. You want your crispy marigolds. If you can't hear them, they're probably not dry. All right, I'm gonna set these to the side, but I'm gonna show you this like little trick that we use sometimes for the teas that we are drinking, not selling, not producing, not marketing, just for us, because we're much less picky about it and we're just making cups for ourselves, and usually we're making them pretty quick. We'll come through, this is what we harvest on, and then we transfer to our dehydrator, and then we dehydrate, and then we store. But we'll come and use these little garden trays from a garden store. You know, the ones that have like very little tiny cuts in the back? And then we'll go through it every other day, every second day, we go and harvest our flowers. So right now, because of winter, we only have been harvesting calendula, and we just started on our borage. But yeah, now if I was just making tea for myself at home, I could use a flower that's not fully dry like this, for sure. Because it's just for me, and I'm using it pretty quickly, right? Like I might have picked this yesterday and I could use this in tea today, but you want to make sure that full aeration is happening so that no mold has a chance to occur. So when we have these out, these are sitting out on top of these. There's no bottom. So it's nothing but airflow, full airflow all day, 24 hours a day. Okay, now these are the ones that are just for us. The market, again, the ones we market, we use our dehydrator for to be fully assured, but the things that we use for us, we can just air dry them. And here I have a full tray of marigolds that we've air dried. And these are great. And this is extremely easy if you don't want to harvest the entire like stem and air dry that way. Because if you're going to hang them, you're going to have to harvest stem. So that's what I'm going to show you guys next. But if you're just harvesting flower, you can tray it up like this. Look at these. There's some more, another tray of calendula. And they're drying really well. Because they're fully dry, they have no bugs. They don't offer any like nutrients, moisture for anything to come eat. And I'm dropping the petals everywhere. So let me stop crunching these girls around. Okay, next I'm going to show y'all how to, let's go do a little harvest though. I'm going to dump these old ones right here. Okay, is everyone still with me? Y'all are still here? So hard.
Some of the gals had to pop off, but I'm recording it.
Okay.
And people watch the recordings.
All right, let's head over to the calendula and then I'm going to show you how to hang dry. The day is just getting more and more beautiful. I hope y'all get some time outside today. Oh, Cynthia is here. Here we go, here we go. All right, so we're gonna come over here to the calendula. Hey, Alex. Can you borrow my keys? Yes, 100%.
I'm gonna move it to the church. I'm so sorry.
Don't be sorry. Alex is gonna move my car because I'm blocking the gate. Okay, so I also wanted to talk about amaranth because amaranth is a grain, but amaranth can also be used in many, many other things, and you can dry it. And someone recently told me that they used it in tea, which I thought was a little bit bananas. But now thinking about it, I'm like, it's not that bananas at all to use amaranth in tea. Okay, Alex, my keys are in my bag hanging right there. Go for it. Thank you. All right, let's jump in. So when you're hanging upside down, the reason you hang things upside down is so that all of those essential oils, which are usually what carries all the medicines, you want all of those essential oil. Oh my God, we're in for a treat. I just saw a bunch of stinging nettle. I'm about to show y'all how to do stinging nettle too. Okay, so all of those essential oils are going to go into the flower, which is the part of this plant that you're going to be using for your tea. If you're using lemon verbena, same thing. Hanging it upside down, all of it's going to be pulled down. It's kind of like when you cure onions or garlic, right? We want to hang them with the bulb side down so that you can get all of those nutrients back down to your bulb, right? So anywho, I'm going to set this up so it's bees on bees on bees over here. Here's our calendula. We've got a lot. We're pretty big on this flower. And by we, I mean me. The calendula is here because this is my jam. This is my favorite flower besides sunflowers. Okay. Hey, girlfriend. So when you're harvesting, ideally, it's wonderful. Sorry, the sun is right there. It's wonderful to get these almost opened buds for your teas. These are great. You can't use these fully open buds, of course. You can. But a lot of the things you're going to want from your tea are still in it. And once this opens up, you know, once flowers open up, they're open to pollination. They're open to, they're starting to make their seeds, right? They're transitioning. When you get these almost fully open ones, these little buds, they haven't begun their transition quite yet. So there's still, there's more nutrients in the flowers. So here we go. I'm trying to place this so you guys can see. So if I'm going to hang this upside down, I want to harvest about this full stem like this. Okay. I'm going to get a few of these less opened up ones, and then I'm going to mix it in with a few of these more open ones. And here we go. I'll come over here. I'm going to get this bud. My suggestion with your calendula is to always leave some for the bees, and to make sure you're harvesting often, or else your plant is going to start to go to seed. So I've got my tray right there. And I'm going to show you what it looks like when your plant starts to go to seed. And then Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to push mute. I meant to push switch. Okay. But we may have been harvesting so well that there are no buds on here. And I will be giving everyone, there are no seeds flourishing. How incredible. Well, I can't show you what the seeds look like then, because apparently we're on top of harvest, which never happens with calendula, because as you can see, it's a lot of calendula we're harvesting. But I'm going to go ahead and grab this girl right here. And I just drop them on the tray. Let's go ahead and grab this young one right here. Let's get 2 more. You and you. And then let's get a few of those younger buds that are not as open, like you. And this one right here. Okay. Sweet. This should be good. Okay. Now, while I'm over here, I'm going to do something very, very risky, which is I'm going to harvest some stinging nettle. Now, I don't have gloves on. So I would never, ever, ever suggest you harvest stinging nettle without gloves because it stings. But I'm going to do something where I'm going to cut it and I'm going to pick it up with the pruners so that I don't have to touch it. Stinging nettle is incredible. It has so many things in it that are amazing for you. Anti-inflammatory. It's great for your entire cardiovascular system. It's so nutrient dense. The only reason I think people don't use it as much is because it's scary, because it stings your fingers so poorly. So I'm going to harvest these longer ones right here. Go ahead and cut that and drop that on my tray. If you have, oh, look at that. A little friend came. Hey, girl. Okay. Anywho, we'll make sure that that ladybug gets to a nice little home. All right, so let's get this one. Let's get you. Now, stinging nettle, a lot of people feel like stinging nettle is a weed. It grows pretty wild in most places. We did not plant not one plant of stinging nettle. I'm pretty sure that it came in on the compost because we have community compost. So it's growing everywhere. I mean, it's growing there, it's growing here. Here are peach trees that are just starting to bud. And but I do keep the stinging nettle in this row so that if I want to use stinging nettle, which we do, but look at that. Here she is, literally everywhere, just growing everywhere. So
we've made
if you're gonna decide that stinging nettle is something you want to use, this is a plant that you really, really have to stay on top of, which is totally possible, but it's a commitment. So just be aware. That's my experience is it's a commitment, because otherwise it's going to run your farm. And if you're farming, if you just have kind of open fields, that's probably okay. But because we have a community space, we pull out our nettle all over the farm all the time because it is, dangerous. I mean, I have a 4-year-old. I can't just send her out to pick strawberries if there's nettle there, right? So anywho, with this nettle, when I harvest it, I cut as long and as much of the stem as possible, because you can see it's already has new buds coming out of the node, kind of like I showed you with the verbena. So I know for sure this girl is going to grow right back. So let me see how much of this I can pick up with my pruners. This is me testing my
Get it on your skin, Lex. Just
and
grab
again,
some tape.
Something I would suggest you do? No, because look, I just touched nettle on accident and I stung my finger. Okay. I just want to get a wee bit more. Okay. Perfect. There we go. We got nettle. We've got calendula. Let's go hang some herbs. Now, when you're hanging herbs, again, you really, really want to make sure that you are hanging them in a place that does not have direct sunlight. In fact, the darker, the better. You want a place that's very dry in your house. So people say like, oh, I hang dry my herbs in the kitchen. I'm like, that might not always be best because kitchens can get pretty humid, right? We cook in our kitchens a lot. We clean our kitchens a lot. So kitchens aren't always the best spot for that. But I think if you have like a door opening area where you get a lot of like drafts or a lot of aeration kind of coming through. That is perfecto. All right, so I'm gonna dump one of these Nesco trays real quick
So just real quick,
so I can place
TC,
it. I'm actually gonna grab a glove really quick so I can work with this nettle, because fool me once, you know the phrase. I've got gloves right here.
I hear those.
Now, I don't suggest using garden gloves. They're not the best with stinging nettle because garden gloves have mesh on the back, and nettle will sting you through the mesh, straight up, sting you through the mesh. She did not come here to play with you, but kitchen gloves, like regular old cleaning kitchen gloves, perfect. They're thick enough that the nettle doesn't sting through, and they cover the back and the front of your hands. All right, so I've got my harvest tray here. When you're hanging them, I also had someone ask me, what do you hang your herbs with? You can hang your herbs with whatever you've got. Kitchen twine, regular twine for tying up herbs. I mean, it's totally fine. But the main thing is you need a ton of aeration and not a lot of light, because herbs burn. Also, like, that's the reason you can't, have your dehydrator on too high. Herbs are gonna burn very quickly, so you just want to be careful. All right. Also, you don't want to have bundles that are too big, because if you have bundles that are too big, you're not gonna get a lot of airflow in there, and that can lead to mold, and that's very dangerous. It's not great for you in your home. It's very bad for you if you have a business and you are looking to sell your product and market your product. It's not the best. All right, I've got a massive roll of twine right here. I'm gonna go ahead and grab some of this. We don't play around with twine because we feed a lot of people on this farm. This farm grows a lot of food for a lot of people. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and, here we go. My rule of thumb with, like, I always say, like, about that big should be your herb bundle at the largest, just so you can make sure proper aeration. All right, so I'm gonna tie this up.
Is
Pray
that like a quarter
my
size net?
garden ancestors that your girl don't get stung up by this nettle while I do this. Okay. And then you also want to make sure you tie them really tight, because as they lose their moisture, they're going to lose some of their volume, and you'll have nettle falling on the ground everywhere. All right, so here we go. Now, some people will also, here's another trick. You can also use a little paper bag. I've got my tea bag here. But you can also use a paper bag. Where are my paper bags? Oh, here we go. You can also use a paper bag and wrap that around what you're drying. And if any falls down, it'll go in the bag. But paper bags also wick away moisture. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to get one bag with these gloves on. It's like a joke. Here we go. So if you have proper aeration, low light, you can dry your herbs just like this. If you feel like you want to have it happen a little more rapidly, you can also just tie this bag around, hang dry it like this. I suggest bags if you're using really small leaves like lavender, things like that, chamomile. We're gonna have tiny little pieces here and there. You're gonna want to use a bag if you have them around and if that feels right to you. Otherwise, you could totally hang dry. Okay, calendula, same thing. With calendula, you don't use the leaves. So there are two schools of thought here with calendula flowers, which I'm sure could be transferred over to like chamomile flower. Well, you can use the leaves for chamomile flowers, but like echinacea, things like that. Even marigolds, where some people will strip the leaves off so they can have bigger bunches just for the flowers. If you're marketing primarily calendula flowers, I could see that being beneficial. But in my opinion, since you're trying to get all of the oils and the most nutrients from your plant, you're gonna want to leave the leaves on because the leaves also carry some of those things. So, it's not all in the flower. The flower's cute, but it's not all there. So Here we go. I'm gonna bundle these. They smell. I wish there was like the technology for y'all to watch a Zoom class and then me to be like, and smell. And you could all just like smell with me too. We're not there yet, but I think we're close. Okay, so I'm gonna tie this bundle. Now I will say, like here on the farm, we don't hang dry a lot because our farm gets a stellar amount of sun. And we have all these elements here. We have birds and bugs and dogs and all kinds of things here. So I don't usually suggest doing like drying your things outside. But if you're doing this at home and you're just kind of drying them right outside your kitchen window maybe, or right on your porch, I don't think that's going to be as detrimental or as scary. Now, I also forgot to show you, skipped a step, so sorry. Washing your herbs, washing them after you've harvested. Okay, so here's my bundle. I would dry something like this. I've got bigger blooms on my calendula because this plant has been here for about 6 months now. So I am doing a smaller bundle just because the blooms are really big and I want to make sure everything gets super dried out. But I will put this in a paper bag because as it dries, the petals fall off the flower. And I want the petals for my tea. I do want the petals. So I would place that in a paper bag. Okay. So real quick, when you're washing your herbs, a big thing you don't want to do is overwash your herbs. You super don't want to overwash your herbs because if you steep these herbs in water, you know, what are you doing? You're essentially making pre-tea to your tea, right? Sometimes in like my home garden, when I make tea for myself, I don't even wash the herbs because I don't have a dog or a cat. So I don't have animals in my backyard really. There's not a lot to wash off. I don't have any dust, so I don't have to really wash them off. On the farm, we do wash them immediately when we harvest them. So we harvest them straight into these huge buckets, these massive containers. So we'll fill this with water and then we'll go through, we'll not fill it, but you know, halfway full of water. And then we'll go through and we'll harvest by section and we'll use a bucket a section. We also have these like smaller harvesting buckets. Let me grab one right here. That look like this. So we'll go through and be like, okay, put water in here. And then this one will be all lemon verbena. Have another one that's all lemon balm. Have another one that's all whatever it is we're looking for. There's a squirrel coming to visit me. He wants to be in our class with us. So yeah, do not wash too much. Stinging nettle, you definitely want to wash because it has those little needles on it. If it will like anything around it in its elements, it's gonna pick up. And that's the only way I could think of that you're like, you absolutely want to wash this. Other than that, they'll give everything a quick rinse and take it right out and get it on some kind of sheet that it can like start to aerate on that has a lot of places for water to go through. All right, everybody still with me? We're still good? How are we doing on time, Soch? Oh my God, it's going so long. Are we okay?
I'm recording. Can you hear me? You froze. Can you guys hear me, see
No,
me?
with storing.
Can you hear me, Lex?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So I'm recording this and we'll share it with the people that had to leave and a couple of others.
I'm sorry, I'm missing it.
Did I cut out?
You did, but you're coming back.
Okay. I guess my internet's really unstable. TCEDC also has a dehydrator. If people want to grow, we have a commercial kitchen and you can come use our dehydrator. I will have to leave in about 15 minutes. So, but I can make Carmen the host, if that's okay with you, Carmen.
Is that cool? Carmen, is that cool with you if we do 5 more minutes? I want to be respectful of y'all's
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. We're recording, so anything that you have, it'll be on there.
Okay, sweet. So if anybody has to dip, then you can use the recorded. Okay, great. So just a few more minutes though. Because I did start late, which was 100% my fault, y'all. I'm so sorry. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to go over though is storing, okay? Because for y'all that are storing at home, this is a little easier. But for y'all that are interested in like marketing and selling these as part of like your farmstead or like maybe adding to your CSA, things like that, storing is tricky. Okay, so there are a couple things that, a couple ways people have stored, okay? You could like little plastic containers like this, right? That just pop up. Ugh, the lids come off. You just got a plastic container with a lid. Not getting a ton of moisture in there, but it's not necessarily like completely airtight. When you're storing herbs, you want as airtight as possible. So like Ziploc bags, I don't even suggest Ziploc bags because air can get in Ziploc bags. But my deep suggestion is mason jars. And then if you can, utilizing, especially for people who you want to market, utilizing a vacuum seal system. So there are vacuum seals where you like can push your herbs through those little like plastic things and it seals around. Those are great because the more air that gets in, the higher chance you have of mold. But they're on vacuum seal containers, you can actually vacuum seal your lid to your jar. So it comes with this little white top. I'm sorry I don't have it here. We have one at my house, but I didn't bring it. Totally should have. You put it on top, you turn the vacuum seal machine on, and it sucks out all of the air until the knob will get to about 15. And then you won't even be able to like lift this. And it makes it so that it like the pop top, you know how all jars have like a pop top, so you know if it's been open or not. So it sucks the pop back down. So you know, because you push it and there's no pop top. If you don't have a vacuum seal machine and you're growing these at home, for sure, you can totally use one of these. Pop it down as much as possible. There's a mosquito landing on me. And then close these as super tight as possible. In my experience, mason jars with these sure-tight lids or ball jars with these sure-tight lids have been easiest. Also, I've had questions about the wide mouth jars as opposed to these, the smaller mouth. I don't find that there's a big difference. I don't. But I know that a lot of people who grow tea find that the wide mouth is better. I'm sure if we took a poll, it'd be like 60, 40%. 40 doesn't care and 60 say go wide mouth. So that's totally up to you. But anywho, and then we ship our teas in these compostable brown bags that are like a Ziploc. These are great, but I will say if you store them in a vacuum seal airtight, your herbs can hold a lot of their medicinal properties for up to a year. They're still going to be good up to a year. The more air that comes in though, you're shortening their lifespan. So by the time we have like this, we usually mark like 4 to 6 months on these bags because they do, you know, this is tighter than a Ziploc for sure. And it's got this like material inside that is like a plastic. So it's going to keep it from, you know, rotting, I guess. But you want to make sure that 4 to 6 months if you're not going fully vacuum sealed, and then you can go up to a year if you are fully vacuum sealed, which is kind of amazing. I would also say store these out of light. You do not want to be near light at all when you're storing your herbs, as dark as possible. And then of course, when people buy herbs, I know that it's super cute to like buy your herbs in reusable containers and things like that. But one of the reasons we went with this darker bag is because we didn't want to have any light on our herbs. Sorry, I'm putting on my shirt because there's mosquitoes coming out, but we didn't want to have any light on the herbs, and you can kind of extend their shelf life that way. And yeah, so the last couple little tidbits I wanted to give y'all were when you're making blends, the rule of thumb is like 2 to 1 ratio, 2 parts base, 1 part florals. So you don't want to have like tons and tons of florals as your makeup. One, for you as the maker, that's really tricky to grow that many flowers. Two, packaging wise, you're going to get less in if you're trying to like send these to people. So always 2-to-1 base to florals. And then I think that all I wanted to do. Herbs go, and things that are extremely well marketed. So if you're and can you can grow in a large amount if you're growing on a farm and you want to start marketing. So one of those was going to be strawberry leaves. Strawberry leaves are very good for you. Raspberry leaves, amazing. The more research comes out about raspberry leaves on a regular basis of how it's amazing for your for the female reproductive organs and for all kinds of stuff, but specifically like menstruation, anything menstrual. And I know some of us have even like, you drink it when you're starting to go into labor to help speed it up. I did it with 2 of my kids. It totally helped. And lemongrass, borage, rosemary, sage, horehound, calendula, peppermint, catnip, all of these things we're growing here. But I would say start small. If you've never done this before, start small and feel really confident in it before you expand and like start to do more. But I hope that all of you guys can feel like you can use herbs from your garden to nurse you, nurse your family, nurse your community, and to feel like this is something you can do marketably. So Soch, if you guys can, at TCEDC, get a vacuum sealer. I mean, you're setting people up for being able to like completely market themselves in your commercial kitchen. But aside from that, do y'all have any questions before we wrap?
I have a question. What's like, if for somebody who's starting, what would you recommend? Just like a couple of basic herbs and florals, like what handful would you suggest starting with?
For starting, I would suggest start with a mint. Keep it in a pot. Don't plant it in your ground because it's going to take over. It's like a weed. It's also extremely hard to kill. I would say do lavender. Lavender is amazing. It's beautiful. And then I would suggest something really simple like a chamomile. Chamomile, you drop their seed early spring, maybe even like when I talked about planting like at the end of the frost. But chamomile requires no care. You just harvest it. You just come out and you pick your buds and you pick your flowers. Look at all our ducks over here. So those would be my 3 go-tos, would be lavender, peppermint, and chamomile.
So I have, like I was saying before, I have like this whole cabinet full of teas, and you had mentioned that it only is really good for a year. Do you recommend I go through my cabinet and, because like I do bust them out whenever like we're sick or, this kind of stuff, but I have tons of different types of herbs, sitting in my cabinet for the in case.
Yeah. I mean, I would say if you grew it yourself and you stored it yourself, you can push it a little more. But as time passes, they will start to lose some of their medicinal properties. So I wouldn't say it's like it's not a dangerous thing as in like, I mean, unless there's moisture in there, right? If it's not having a proper seal, like if you have like tea bags, I mean, they get a decent amount of aeration, but like there's not a lot stopping them from molding. So I would say just gauge it based on like what makes you feel super safe. If you're like, I harvested this, I put it in this super tight jar, I'm using it as we go, I'm checking it through, like you're probably fine. But after about 6 months, they do start to lose some of their medicinal properties, and it happens slowly. It's not like they're not good for you at all anymore. But I would say about a year in, you're like, okay, it's time to rehash. Look at my friends that came with me to the orchard.
Well, thank you for this, Lexi. I appreciate it, and I think I have my herb garden, but now I'm going to like really focus. It's like I kind of just use it whenever I feel like it. And then it's like hanging out, but I think this will give me more like a structural and more methodical way of actually harvesting my herb garden because
Yeah.
I just kind of just like grab it whenever I need it, and then it's like growing, and then I'm like la la da da da. But you know, now I now I could like actually, you know, store it, wash it, and maybe market a little bit of it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think if you're just growing it for yourself, like there's nothing wrong with that approach. Like if it's just for you and your people, like it's okay if it's something that's just beautiful and fun and lighthearted. I think you want to be able to have the option of like this becoming more though, you know? So I would say if you're feeling comfortable about like the few herbs you're growing and you're feeling like I'm pretty good at this, start to expand into herbs that are not as commonly grown but are commonly used. Maybe like marjoram, maybe like horehound, maybe like, you know, even things like tarragon. Like expand what you're utilizing, because that'll keep it exciting and fun and new. That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense because I think I get kind of, you know, mint, of course, and, you know, sage and basil and, you know, and I do a lot of marigolds. This year I didn't have a huge marigold garden because I started a paleta business, and that like took my whole entire summer away. But yeah, I think I'm gonna start doing more of the uncommon type of herbs. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope that this was useful for anybody at any time. But yeah, so great.
Yeah, thank you, Lexi. As always, your number one fan, my son Cash, was listening in the background.
What's up, Cash Money? Oh my gosh, love that kid.
So, you know, we're going to try as well. But thank you so much for this. I'm very grateful. And it looks really warm there.
I know. I'm spitting already. And the animals are our house. You know it's warm. When the animals are
It made
following
me
you around, it's warm. You know it's
jealous.
warm. I know.
I love that you're out there now, and I'm like, it's cold. And it's like seeing that you're in California and enjoying the garden, and then I'm like, yeah, there's snow all over mine. And so it's just kind of like wild, and I'm just you gave me the bug again.